you were, for the official record, you were in the famed Shawshank Redemption movie.
I was in the famed Shawshank Redemption, directed by Frank Darabont,
That's
and
awesome.
filmed in, it's one of my favorite movies, too. It's so much like life, you know. Yeah, because it seems like all of your life you're always chipping through that wall, and then finally you get a chance to swim through crap for 300 yards, and then you're out.
Wow.
That's Morgan Freeman, right?
I was just an extra in that one. I didn't have lines in that one, but I was visible in a few scenes, really good scenes.
We'll have to check that out.
But that was a kick, too, yeah.
Which now, can you detail specifically what your role was in that movie so we can go back and check that out and watch that? Our audience would love to do that.
In Double Dragon?
In both movies, in Double Dragon and Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, well, Double Dragon was about, it was actually based on a video game that had been popular among the kids at that time. And there was a guy, I'm trying to think, the guy who does Iron Chef now, Mark DeCascos, he was one of the Kung Fu guys in that, and another guy who used to be in Party of Five, and his name escapes me, and also Alyssa Milano was in that. But I played like a police sergeant, and basically I was kind of interacting with the captain, through the scenes I was in, you know, and we had one little big kind of blowout in the locker room before we were supposed to go back out into the streets, because in that movie, the criminals control the streets at night, and so everybody and the cops went in, and the police had it during the day. But at this time, he was taking a stand. We were going out at night, you know, so there was a big blow up, and that was my, I guess we'd say, my big scene between them. I even at that point had an interest in doing some acting, but if you're going to do that, you just have to have some money to last, you know, because, you know, at that time I was married and kids, you know, in school and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I really couldn't pursue that like I wanted to.
Well, that's doubly intriguing for me because I'm actually from that Generation X, and I saw the genesis of that video game, and then I used to play with my peers at the arcades, the actual stand-up, the Double Dragon game, and so it's an honor.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's an honor to be speaking to someone who actually played, who had an integral role, some kind of role, any kind of role in the making of that film.
Oh, wow, that's interesting, yeah. And I've never seen the actual game itself.
Really?
I've never seen it, but you know, I guess my son might have known it because he was a little guy at the time.
Yeah,
but
definitely fun game from the 1980s.
Right. In Shawshank, I was just a criminal, but my cell was next to was actually supposed to be right next to Andy Dufresne's cell. It turned out you'll see me in the scene where he says, "Dufresne, the sergeant's come down. The turnkey, you better be in your cell when I get back there." So I'm standing there with three criminals. I'm the guy who looks in the cell to find he's not there, and it's surprised, but then jumps back in place. That was where it was most visible. In other scenes, I was just kind of atmosphere. I was in the background eating or something, or walking in the yard and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
But that was a great film, yeah.
Oh, it's a 5-star movie. We'll definitely have to check that out, and we know that our fans will certainly be doing that. Which leads up to, you've played martial arts roles. You were in the movie Double Dragon, as I said. My generation embraced that whole genre. And so why do you have such a great interest in comic books? Is that somehow related to martial arts and the video game era?
Well, you know what? When I was young, I mean, going back to like 4th grade, I was just into comic books, you know, from Superman, comic books, Marvel comic books, all the characters. There was another company at that time. They had a group called Thunder Agents, and that was probably one of my favorites. And there was the comic artist back in the day, Kurt Swan. He did Superman, and Jack Kirby. And my favorite artist was a guy named Wally Wood. He did Thunder Agents. Just an incredible artist. And we started out as comic artists. You know, we had stories to tell. We wanted to make our own stories and create our own characters, and that's where that interest started.
Very nice, very nice. I'm a comic book fan as well.
Okay. I think it stimulates the imagination for young kids. You know, my dad he wanted me to go to the library and get other books, but I guess he got to a point he got tired of just begging me. He said, well, at least if he's got comic books, at least he is reading, you know, something, you know.
Definitely.
Okay, so Verle, you've just been added to the Watermelon Sushi family, and you're going to be an associate producer for our film. Would you like to tell us about some of your other upcoming film projects you have in the works there?
Yeah, one in particular. Well, actually, I can tell you about two of them. One is a story of a gentleman in Cleveland. His name is Winston Willis. Winston was kind of the American gangster, although I'll say not as much of a gangster in terms of the violence and that kind of thing in Cleveland. He's a gentleman who led a very colorful life. He actually started in Alabama, kind of like from a relatively modest family, and went to Detroit, and actually had aspirations of being a filmmaker himself, kind of inspired by Oscar Micheaux and the few black filmmakers that were of that day. But he was pretty adventurous. I think if he had continued, he'd have been similar to like Melvin Van Peebles. But as it turned out, he came to Cleveland and had a really gift for buying real estate and property and blighted areas and uplifting them. And he really turned the city around. At one time, in fact, he was the second largest employer of African Americans in Cleveland. He had many businesses, restaurants, supermarkets, movie theaters, bars. Also had a after hours, right? That was kind of one of the little illegal businesses. He was into numbers as well. At that time, before the lottery, it was called Clearinghouse. So he did some interesting things. So now there's some interest in having a movie on his life made, which I actually am helping to write along with his sister, Andra Willis, who is kind of spearheading that. But it should be a really interesting show, and we have actually some Hollywood people who are interested in it, whose names I won't mention at this time because I don't want to. It's kind of privileged information, but there are some heavyweights that are interested in doing it. So I'm just hoping that everything goes as planned. And also, I'm working with Dana Bratton again, the guy who had actually hooked me up with the Jackson's tour. He's training a young lady in martial arts, and we are developing a project for this young lady. It should be an female African-American martial artist, and I don't want to give away the whole plot, so I'll just leave it at that. But, I'm just, praying that comes to being, and it should be a very nice film, too.
We'll definitely be looking out for both those projects and any and all upcoming projects of which you're involved. Well, listen, we're out of time. You're welcome. You're very welcome, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Well, again, thank you, Verle, for being on the show. And by the way, you do have a sexy voice.
Well, thank you. Very kind. I'll take that as a compliment.
You're welcome. It is certainly a compliment. Well,
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Well, that's it, folks, and please join us next time for another Sexy Voices of Hollywood.